Hey friends, welcome back to another video. My name's Lefebvre and October is almost up. It's almost Halloween, so I wanted to paint one more kind of moody landscape before it ends. So let's jump in and get started. Okay friends, so today we're going to be painting another moody landscape. I've just been in the mood to make these like dark kind of landscapes, especially with the season that we're in. So I'm going to keep it quite easy, but it's really great practice even if you are a bit more advanced. So I'm painting once again in my Etcher Lab cold press watercolor sketchbook, the perfect sketchbook. I have my larger brushes here for the background washes, as well as some smaller size 2 detail and like a liner. Then I have my Etcher Lab, not my Etcher Lab, my Shinhan watercolors, paper towel, water, and we're ready to go. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is cover the background in water. I want really soft blends for this background sky. So you can do it with clean water, or you can pick your color of your background. So I'm going to do, I think, like a slight darkish green with like a gray. So I'm going to add some like indigo and brown, just a bunch of muddy colors together. Okay. I want it more on the gray side, but like a hint of green in there. But I want it nice and light. So I'm going to add lots of water on my brush. And I'm going to coat the whole background. I want it light. So I'm not going to add any more pigment, just water. Okay, to make it super, super light. Okay, the more water you add, the lighter it's going to be. Okay. So there, see how light that is? And that's going to be kind of like our sky. And this is really great practice to practice these kind of like soft washes that aren't streaky, because sometimes, depending on our paper also, it makes a difference. When you're trying to do like a nice even gradient or a background, it can get kind of streaky. So this painting is really great practice for that. One thing I will say is try not to use a lot of pressure with your brush. That's when you tend to get some of those marks. You want to be nice and soft with your strokes. So you're not lifting color, you're not kind of creating those marks. So see how even that washes? Then I'm going to add a little bit more color to it. And I'm going to make it darker towards the bottom. Maybe a little bit more indigo. I kind of want, kind of like mountains in the background. Just light ones. Nothing crazy. We're going to get darker and darker as we go. So again, just trying to create that even soft wash. And because the whole thing is wet, it should be a nice, pretty even blend. If you want to create some like clouds or movement in your sky, you can take your brush and just gently create a little bit of movement like that. It's totally up to you. Okay. Then I'm going to make it a little bit darker as we get further to the bottom, just adding a little bit more indigo, a little bit more green. Oops, painted on my other page. Okay, and I just want to make it a lot darker, and this just helps create that kind of misty ground. So see how you're not getting these defined lines from each layer. So we have this really, really light layer, kind of like a medium layer, and dark here, but there's no defined lines because we're working wet on wet. Now, if you do want defined lines like a ground, like we've done before, you would wait in between for it to dry. I actually want this a little bit softer of a blend, so I'm going to wash off my brush, dry it a bit, and then just softly blend it out a bit more so it's less harsh. Okay. Now, troubles you can run into with this technique, and what I see a lot of beginners run into trouble, their paper dries way too fast, and then they end up dropping water. So like maybe they added too much water, and then when that happens, see here, you get this bleed right? There's too much water there. And what water actually does is repels color. So if this happens to you, don't worry, dry your brush off, okay? And then just gently go over it. You kind of want to continue going over all of these spots so it remains evenly wet. When you get those harsh lines, it's because there's an imbalance in the amount of water between sections. So if you have some that are lighter than others or some like of those hard edges, it's because that area was a lot more wet than the surrounding area. Okay. And then if you feel like it's just all too much and it didn't work, wash off your brush with just some water, go over the whole thing again and try and make it all the same amount of wetness. That is key. That is the whole thing to creating an even wash, is you want it to dry evenly. Now, even this, what I'm doing right now, is a little tricky because I'm adding more water so you can see these lines right here. It's kind of giving a really cool effect, but it's because this area is more wet than this area. So it's creating that separation. So we just want to make sure the whole thing is evenly wet, but I also don't want to bring up all this darkness, the darker color, upwards. So what I'm going to do, wash off my brush, dry it, and then bring it, start from the light and then bring it down. Okay, there are ways to fix those areas. Okay, so now again, I'm going to add, because it's all the same amount of wetness, I'm going to add a bit more color. My trick also is I'm not adding more water onto my brush. Remember, more water is going to create a different amount of wetness in your painting. So I go right into my paint. And because I'm also using a bigger brush, I got to be careful that I'm not adding more water. It's going to hold more water naturally. So we got to be careful that it doesn't, you know, disperse more water on the page. And that's what kind of creates some of those lines. I'm going to try and create like some mountains or I don't know. You can even use your brush to kind of lift some color to create some mountains in the back if you want. I'm going to do trees in front, so I'm not really too concerned, but I want to make this darker, a little bit darker. So I'm going to add just a little bit more color, a little bit more. Maybe a little bit of brown, kind of mellows it out a bit. Like so. I want it to be all very soft. The only thing I'm going to want to be kind of defined are the trees that are going to go in front. Okay. So that's why I'm working wet on wet. Now, if you want to lift color and have some lighter areas too, you can wash off your brush, dry it, and then lift some areas where you just apply pressure with a clean brush. And it lifts. Now I will say I've had some papers that don't lift paint really well, or some paints that don't lift well. So if it's not working, it might not be you're not doing anything wrong. It might be your materials. So just keep that in mind, okay? Don't ever get discouraged if it doesn't work. That does happen from time to time. I'm going to try and do a little bit here too. This paper lifts really well. And I just keep drying my brush. That kind of helps lift the color. Because again, if I add water to this area, it's going to create those harsher lines. Okay. So I kind of want that to dry. I don't know if I like the mountains, but it's fine. Okay, so let's let this full thing dry and then we can do some mountains in the foreground or some trees in the foreground. Okay, so now that it's dry, we're gonna work in layers, going really, really soft in the background, so really light washes to the foreground, which is gonna be a lot darker. So I'm just gonna grab my size 2 brush, clean it with some water, and just a minimal amount of paint, like honestly, barely there, because I want to kind of outline some of these mountains, but I want it to be like they're in the misty background. So I'm just kind of adding a little bit of color. Okay, just a tiny bit, because I really want it to be misty, like they're in the background. I find a lot of the time we use way more paint than we need. Like I'm just barely touching this tiny area of color. And I'm just using the side of my brush and kind of skimming it this way, so I get this dry brush effect, which kind of acts like a really nice texture. You can even do just like little tiny trees on the mountain if you want, just like little tiny lines. If you want, you don't have to. I think I'm gonna do some trees in the background here, really, really light, okay? So I'm going to, you could do some evergreen trees if you want. So again, minimal amount of paint on your brush, and I'm just gonna kind of swoop and do some evergreen here. And if you fear that it's gonna be too light, that's okay. It's always better to go lighter than darker, because you can always add more color. It's harder to lift at times, okay? And then as I get closer to the bottom, I'm just gonna wash off my brush and just kind of blend it out, just gently. Just do a couple of these kind of like evergreen tree ones, and then I'm gonna do some more spooky leafless trees. Just like that. Okay, and I'm just kind of scooping back and forth. Like so. Like that. And then I'm going to try and do some of these spooky kind of trees. So I want to start with a trunk. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even think of the word like that. And then have branches. They're all going to be kind of pointing upwards. And then little branches kind of coming off. So I'm really using just minimal pressure with my brush. Kind of just skimming to get these really tiny branches. If you have a smaller brush, might want to use that. And then as you get down to the bottom, again, I'm going to wash off my brush and dry it a bit and just kind of blend it out. Okay, I'm going to do it again. When you're drawing trees like this, what I want you to think is the bottom of the trunk is always bigger, so it gradually gets like thinner to the top. Same with branches. The closer the branches to the trunk, the thicker it is, and then it starts to get thinner. So kind of keep that in mind when you're drawing out your trees. Then has the tiny little branches coming off of that. Now I know this is super, super light, but this is going to be the background, right? So it doesn't really, I know it doesn't look like much yet, but once you add those trees in the foreground, it will help. Let's do some on the other side. So it gets thinner. Maybe even a little darker as it reaches the base. there. Just blend it out a bit. Like that. Okay. And this is also really going to help with value studies. So as you can see, I'm kind of using, like I used a few different paint colors, but I'm technically really only using one shade over the whole thing. So this helps with your value study and creating different values to create depth, which is really important when painting, well, really anything, with watercolor, acrylic, anything. You really want to achieve kind of painting depth with your paintings, and value is a huge part of that. I'll wash off like so. This one could be a little bit darker because it's a little bit more on the foreground. So as it gets closer, they're going to start to become a little bit darker. So you can start picking up a little bit more pigment. They can be a bit bigger. And you just continue with these spooky looking trees. Okay, and you're just going to layer and layer until you're done. Okay, so I'm going to kind of speed this up, because I feel like if you watch in real time, you'll want to pull your hair out. And you guys can see how I layer and have this all come together. Okay, so there we go. If you want to add any more, like, you know, texture to the grass or the ground, you can always just grab a brush here and just kind of dry brush. So I'm just grabbing paint, and I have literally barely any water on my brush, and I just kind of drag it across, and it gives a really nice kind of dry brush kind of look. You could do little bits of grass, whatever you want. But yeah, if you want to put a little ghost, kind of like our other one, I like how this one looks. This is a lot of fun to do. But yeah, that's about it. So let's take off the tape, see what it looks like complete. There we go. There's our fun Moody landscape and our previous spider web. I think they go really well together. Thank you all so much for watching my video. I really hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on all my other platforms for tons more content. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.